Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Highlight Haven NFL Recap Show. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Josh Wolliver of Josh's Sports Report to recap Super Bowl 59. Josh, how we doing?
I'm doing good. The nachos were good, if you were wondering.
So you did end up going with the nachos?
Yeah, I did.
And did you have any problems with the messiness of the nachos, eating them on the
No,
couch?
there
You
were
didn't?
not any spillage issues.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. As always, we will be taking callers throughout the stream. You can call in using the link in the chat. We have a very important game to break down. Obviously, Chiefs versus Eagles, Super Bowl in New Orleans. Eagles dominant victory, 40-22. No major injuries, obviously, in this game. Josh, I'll let you get it started here.
Yeah, well, the main thing I want to point out first is that 40-22 makes it seem like
Yeah.
at least an 18-point game was somewhat manageable at a certain time. The Eagles jumped out to a
Mhm.
34 to nothing lead. I mean, this game was
Yeah.
ridiculously out of hand from the start. In my eyes, after that Cooper DeJean pick six, it was over. And at that point, it was only 17-0 in the second quarter. But I saw no way the Chiefs were going to come back. Patrick Mahomes played absolutely terribly. The numbers in this game won't tell you how bad he was. It'll say 257 with 3 touchdowns. The 2 interceptions, obviously, both extremely costly. Cooper DeJean returns it for a pick six on his 22nd birthday. The Chiefs dominated in almost every single asset except for the run game, which obviously is what's going to surprise you most because Saquon Barkley has carried this Eagles team almost all season long. And then when you look at the stats, he wasn't even the leading rusher on his own team, only rushed for 2.3 yards a carry, and he didn't find the end zone. But Jalen Hurts in the passing game more than well made up for it. 221 yards on 2 touchdowns and an interception. The Eagles defense absolutely balled out. Felt like there was pressure on Patrick Mahomes on every single snap. That defensive line was doing well more than their job. They were getting pressure on him. They forced a strip sack. I think had 8 sacks total in this game. Sorry, it was 6.
Mhm.
But overall in this game, Eagles played really well in every single facet. Obviously, when you score 40 points, but I think arguably better than their 40 points was what they did to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense because the 22 points, I mentioned it before, the Eagles jumped out to a 34-0 lead.
Mhm.
The Chiefs, most of their points were against backups in garbage time. So this was really more like a 30-point blowout win for the Eagles. And to do this to Patrick Mahomes, who was in the running for the GOAT conversation had he three-peated, had he won his 4th Super Bowl in what is now 5 appearances, he would easily, in my eyes, slot in time for Tom Brady and one away from becoming the greatest to ever play football. But the fact that the Eagles defense dominated as much as they did, and the fact that they completely shut down any idea. I mean, at halftime, people were turning their TVs off. No pun intended, Kendrick Lamar. It was a great halftime
Mhm.
performance. But people didn't need to watch the second half because of how much the Eagles dominated, and it all started with their defense. Matt, we've got a lot to unpack, but what are your initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, the second half of the game was extremely boring.
Yeah.
Nothing really in that half that you would have missed if you did stop watching the game. Now, you mentioned that the Eagles dominated every aspect of this game other than maybe the run game, and I want to counter that. Obviously, Philly didn't do great in the run game. Jalen Hurts was the leading rusher for them, and Saquon Barkley had 25 carries for just 57 rushing yards, 2.3 yards per carry. Obviously, Kansas City's main goal heading into this game was to contain Saquon, which is something that they executed on at an extremely high level, and they still weren't able to get the job done. Saquon's 57 rushing yards, by the way, helped him break the record for the most rushing yards in a single season, including the playoffs. But where I'm going with this is the fact that Kansas City did far worse in the run game, despite Saquon Barkley not really doing anything. In this one, I believe that the Chiefs had a combined 49 rushing yards. Their leading rusher was Patrick Mahomes with 25 rushing yards.
Yep.
So, I mean, the Eagles didn't have to do much to still dominate the Chiefs, in the run department in this game. They just weren't moving the ball on the ground, obviously, and the Eagles have just been the better team recently. They've scored just over 36 points per game in this postseason, and during their final 2 games of the playoffs, they averaged just under 48 points per game. Of course, that 55-point performance as well against Washington in the NFC Championship game. Eagles went 16-1 in their final 17 games of the season. They were the hottest team in the NFL without a doubt. And Mahomes, you mentioned how his stats look way better than he even performed. And I think if you want to get an accurate picture of how Patrick Mahomes did really perform, you have to look at the first half stats. And
Yep.
in the first half, Mahomes completed just 6 of his 14 passes, 33 passing yards, 2 interceptions, had a passer rating of just 10.7. Of course, as you just mentioned, one of Mahomes' interceptions was housed by Cooper DeJean on his birthday. And this was Mahomes' first pick six in 21 career playoff games, ended his streak of 297 straight passes without an interception. I believe it was a 7 or 8 week streak where he didn't throw a single interception, obviously ended this week. Xavier Worthy was the Chiefs' leading receiver, 8 receptions, 157 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns, as I did predict during the tailgate show, because the Eagles' defense has never been good, at least in DVOA, against opposing teams' number one wide receiver this season. Now it is important to note that that one worthy play in the fourth quarter, his 50-yard touchdown, added a lot to this. He obviously had a 24-yard touchdown as well, but that did make his stats look severely better. And no one else on the Chiefs had even 50 receiving yards. Kelsey was their next leading receiver with just 39 receiving yards. Kelsey didn't catch his first pass until late in the third quarter, and he's someone who's averaged 88 receiving yards per game in his 4 Super Bowls leading up to this. And I mean, it feels like he always steps up in the biggest moments. Even if he didn't have a great season this year or a great season last year, it feels like he's always been able to step up. We just didn't see that from him in this game, which was a really big surprise to me. And then DeAndre Hopkins as well. He did have a touchdown, but he finished the game with just 2 receptions for 18 receiving yards. I know Hopkins has obviously not been great recently being the past 2, 3 years of his career. He's
Yep.
starting to reach that decline. But you look at a future first ballot Hall of Famer, you'd expect a little more in the Super Bowl. Um, 2 receptions, 18 yards is obviously not the ideal stat line for him. And then you get into the Eagles. Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl MVP, 17 of 22, 221 passing yards, 72 rushing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and 1 interception. And then his leading receiver, Devonta Smith, 4 receptions, 69 receiving yards, and a touchdown. A.J. Brown, 3 receptions, 43 receiving yards, and a touchdown. He was reading his book once again on the sideline. I guess it's the good luck book for him, and definitely probably one of the best-selling books recently. Um, I know you can find it on Amazon, so if you want to check that book out, I'm not getting paid to sponsor it, but if you want to check it out, apparently it brings success, so I would recommend. Um,
Inner excellence.
yes, Inner Excellence, that's the name. I've looked it up before, but I forgot the name of it. Inner Excellence, you can find it on Amazon. Go check it out. But both teams struggled heavily on third down in this one. Kansas City went 3 of 11. Philadelphia went 3 of 12. And this is a really important stat. Between sacks allowed, fumbles lost, interceptions, and punts all combined, Kansas City had 15. The Eagles had just 5. Obviously, Josh Sweat was the star of the Eagles' stellar defensive
Yep.
line, finishing the game with 2.5 sacks. In terms of Brandon Graham, who I think we were both monitoring pretty closely throughout the game. He only had 1 tackle, but still great to see him even be able to get onto the field and,
For sure.
be a part of this dominant victory where the Eagles' defense was clearly the deciding factor in this game. The Eagles had the ball for just under 37 minutes of the game, and as you mentioned, this was never close. Philly entered the half up 24, and at one point they were up 34 to nothing. All in all, this was one of, if not the worst game or worst Super Bowl in recent years. But, shout out to Philadelphia, even if I don't like them. This was a really well played game on their end. The entire playoffs were really well played, and they definitely did deserve to win this Super Bowl. Obviously, second in, franchise history.
Yeah, a couple things to add on to what you're going to say as we continue our deep dive and unpack into this is that you were talking about the running department and how if you're going to shut down Saquon Barkley and you
Mhm,
do that, you got to be able to execute on your end. Besides Patrick Mahomes, who carried 4 times for
mhm,
25 yards, Kareem Hunt, 3 carries, 9 yards. Samaje Perine, 1 carry, 8 yards, and Isaiah Pacheco, 3 carries, 7 yards. Matt, they didn't even try. They did not try.
mhm.
They handed the ball off 7 times. Patrick Mahomes took 4 QB scrambles. 7 times, Matt, in a 4 quarter game. I get that you were trailing from the start, but when the passing game wasn't working, when Patrick Mahomes had 33 first half yards and 2 interceptions, was the solution going to be to continue passing the
Yeah, but what
football?
what do you want them to do when they're down 24 to nothing? At one point, they're down 34 to nothing. Are you saying you want them to run the ball at that point?
Absolutely not. I want you to start running the ball when you're down 7-0 after the first quarter.
Mhm. Yeah.
7 rushes in the whole game.
Yeah,
Start
and
running the ball earlier.
but I mean, Philadelphia obviously has one of the best defensive lines in the entire NFL, probably the
Yeah.
best defensive line in the entire NFL. They allowed just 92 rushing yards per game this season, which was the fifth fewest of any team in the league. And to be honest, they could have tried it. Maybe would have at least been able to kind of just switch up what they were doing, try something new. But I doubt it would have worked. I think all in all, Philadelphia was just the better team, was playing with a lot more motivation, a lot more energy, and I don't think that the run game with an aging Kareem Hunt and an probably still injured Isaiah Pacheco really would have worked for Kansas City either, if I'm being completely real.
Okay, but we also saw how dominant the Eagles' defensive line was in the passing game. So it's not like they could limit their effectiveness when they drop back to pass because really Philadelphia made it worse.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. The Eagles were just dominant in this game.
Yeah.
They were extremely dominant. You could make a lot of what ifs. What if Kansas City decided to run the ball here? What if Patrick Mahomes didn't throw 2 interceptions, one of which being a pick six? But at the end of the day, they're still losing by at least one possession, and that's
Yeah.
not changing. A single play wasn't going to decide this game. This was an entire performance by Philadelphia, an entire game where they just destroyed Kansas City, and I mean, you could make up all these scenarios, but this was pure domination. A single play isn't changing this. You can't make what ifs.
It's like pick your poison. They're going to dominate
Mhm.
you either way
Yeah.
defensively. So if you want to run it and not go anywhere, then you can do that. If you want to drop back to pass, they'll have you all covered up in the secondary and then continue to hurt you with your defensive line. Let's go over to the team statistics part of
Mhm.
things where we were talking
Yep.
about third down efficiency. We talked about how both teams struggled. But the way I'm looking at this in context is that the Chiefs went 3 of 11. And Matt, they had 12 first downs in the whole game.
Mhm.
I mean, every single stat you look at for Kansas City, it's bad. 12 first downs in the whole game. I'm pretty sure they had one in the first half, and in the first 2 quarters, they didn't
Mhm.
advance the ball past the midfield point. It was really bad. But 3 of 11 on third down. Um, it and it really was all at the beginning of the game. And then once they fell behind so much, they got a little bit of garbage time production. But at that point, like we'll continue to say it, it did not matter. And so Philadelphia's probably doesn't look great. Number one, their defense was so dominant that it didn't matter as much. But number two is that Kansas City dug themselves into such a deep hole that past halftime, it really didn't matter what they did, right?
Mhm.
Because the Eagles were so dominant. Kansas City punted 6 times, and it just felt like every single time Kansas City got the ball, pretty much for the whole game. I guess at the end, when it didn't really matter, maybe not as much. Philadelphia really didn't care at the end. But Kansas City did nothing with the ball, right? Like it was punt every
Mhm.
single time. And there were some bad miscues from the Chiefs. I think DeAndre Hopkins, at this point late in the game, but it was well over by then. Um, but DeAndre Hopkins was wide open at the 50-yard line. Nobody within 20 yards of him in any direction. If he turns it upfield, he's got a chance at the end zone. Definitely the red zone. But I mean, that's just one of the examples of easily fixable mistakes that can happen in a big game like this. Travis Kelce not having a first half catch. You're right, Matt. I mean, this is not the Travis Kelce we've seen in previous years. Could it be the Eagles' great defense? Could it be uh, just the decline of him as a
Could
player
it
as
be
he
the Taylor
continues to get
Swift
older?
distractions? Could
Yeah, maybe
Mhm.
could be. The
There's a lot of
betting
different possibilities here.
the betting line wasn't high enough. Clearly,
No, it was not. Um, but, tying back to what you said, it was kinda boring to watch Kansas City with the football in
it
the
was.
entire second half because they could go down and score a touchdown, which they barely did at all, but they could go down and score a touchdown, and it'd be like, "Okay, now what? Now you're only down by 27. Now you're only down by 21. What's next?" Like, you're still not making the comeback. It was an extremely boring second half. This is probably one of the dumber comments I'm ever gonna say, but it is funny that Kenny Pickett has played in a Super Bowl before Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. Just
Yeah.
putting that out
And
there.
you know what? I kind of feel bad uh for the announcers in this game because they continued to try and keep people interested. They're like, okay, third quarter, but Patrick Mahomes is on the other team, and I wouldn't count him out until the
Yeah, I
clock
mean,
hits
that
full zeros, and it's only a four
mhm.
score game if they get 4 touchdowns and 4 2-point conversions, and here comes 3 onside kicks in a row. Let's see.
Is
Uh,
it dumb that you can't do an onside kick in the
Oh,
third quarter?
absolutely. That's
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
That rule makes no sense. If you want to risk it, why in the world would they stop you? I mean, I completely agree. That's just a rule that did not need to be implemented.
Yeah, I mean, rest in peace, Pat McAfee. He's not dead, but we're never gonna see anything like that,
Right.
ever again. But it kinda just takes away the exciting, factor of this game. Not, of course, this game, but, like, you don't know when it's coming. You don't know when it's coming, that makes it a lot more exciting. Especially in the Super Bowl, though. You're down by 34 and you need to make a comeback, and you're not allowed to do an onside kick. You're not allowed to do the thing that's gonna help you make a comeback. It's stupid. It's really, really stupid. Um, and imagine Kansas City did come back into this game, and then they ended up losing, and that potential onside kick is the reason they lost. I mean, you have to let a team try their best to come back. I understand the whole Frankie Louvu jumping over the line. This one didn't make sense, though. This one did not
Yeah.
make sense.
Well, I want to actually keep it on the topic of kickoffs
Mhm.
because we've seen a full year of football with this new dynamic kickoff format, and I'm ready to pack it up and bring it home because it
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
terrible. It did not do what the NFL wanted. I mean, if their goal was to lower player safety and player risk of injuries, congratulations, you did that. But you didn't do it any better than you did last season because last season it was all touchbacks. And this season we saw a couple good dynamic kickoffs where kickers would bury it in the landing zone and force a return. But with the guys not being able to get momentum, it was basically just like a stalemate. And did we ever see the returner get past the 30-yard line? I don't think we did because it's so hard when you have 10 guys already lined up and your blockers can't start moving until the guy catches the ball for you to actually progress on it. I say we go back to the original kickoff rules and just move the tee back and to a point where the kickers can't reach the end zone. Like, can we put it at our own? Move it back far enough, and the dudes won't be able to reach NFL. I
Mhm,
promise you, there's a better solution than having everybody play freeze tag until the guy picks up the ball. And it did not make anything dynamic. It made it, it was laughable. There was not a
mhm,
bit dynamic about it. I did not like it whatsoever. I thought it was a good concept, but we've seen a year's worth of what it looked like. And to me, it did not make football any more exciting. It didn't add anything to the kickoff rule. I guess you maybe get a couple more returns, but there weren't any entertaining returns. Like,
mhm.
come on, we're never going to see Devin Hester 100 yard to the house. I mean, this had to be some sort of like NFL all time low in kickoffs returned because I mean, the Cavante Turpin, that was like one. We had one
And
in
and
a
that was even
Jets Seahawks.
the Turpin was a fluke play because he touched the ball before he even picked up the ball.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. The one of the better returns all season was going back to the original kickoff
Mhm.
rules. So I mean, that's just my point of things. We've seen a year's worth of the new kickoff rules, but I think this is something that the owners and the league should vote to change in the offseason. You agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I agree, that makes sense. I think it's all injury based. I would love to see a world where you have to take the ball out. We go back to the original kickoff rules, and you have to return the ball every single time. A fair catch results in a penalty. Injuries would be at an all-time high, viewership would be at an all-time high, and kick return touchdowns would be at an all-time high. Other than the injury part, which is probably the reason why they're not doing that, that would be great. That would be really entertaining, would make kickoffs a lot more interesting. It's either you fair catch it and you let it roll out of bounds, or you're getting tackled at the 20-yard line.
I mean,
Yeah,
Matt, kick returner could become a legitimate position. Like right now, they'll just throw out any running back out there to take a knee because it doesn't take that much skill. But like back in the day, like I mean, you could just have a speedster that's only on your roster to go back there and return kicks.
yeah, there's some teams that do that. I don't know. Most teams,
There's
the
not
kick
many.
return well, most teams, the kick returner is a guy who's not utilized in the offense. It's a
Yeah,
guy who they kinda have maybe rotating between practice squad, actual team,
yeah, some
and,
backup.
for the Commanders, Olamide Zaccheaus, obviously, he's not going to the practice squad, but a guy who's not as impactful, um, in the offense, Jamison Crowder maybe, those kinda guys, obviously. Now, Devin Hester, like, a guy like that, he was a wide receiver for a majority of his career. He played, I believe, 8 seasons as a wide receiver. He had 3 seasons where he was specifically a punt returner, and that's all he did. He had 3 seasons where if you go on Football Reference and it says position, it shows up as punt returner. So is that kinda what you're saying? You wanna see more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it brings a lot more flair to the game. You're right. There's a big injury risk factor, but um, I mean, football's always
Football.
going to be a
Yeah,
violent sport, no
football.
matter how much you try and numb it down. Like, am
Mhm.
I wrong here? I
Yeah,
don't
no.
like injuries. Nobody does. It's probably the worst part about sports, honestly, if we're being honest, because you just hate to see a guy go out, especially when it's serious and it's more than what's happening on the field. But I feel like for the amount of injuries that are going to happen, for the amount of to the ratio of the amount of more fun we're going to be having watching the game, for the more entertainment and the more I agree, the more exciting games will be. I think it's worth it.
Yeah. Now are we ready to move over to the weekly wrap?
Um, I think so. I don't think I have much more on this game. I just wish it was a little more exciting, right?
Yeah.
Like Super Bowl, you'd think two best teams, Chiefs going for a three-peat, but it really didn't feel like that. I mean, just from the start.
I have 2 weekly wraps, this week. I'll do my first one, I'll let you go, and then I'll do my last one, after that. Obviously, we talked about how terrible of a game this was for Patrick Mahomes. How does this impact his long-term legacy, do you think?
Well, Matt, great minds think alike because that was my weekly wrapped question. But glad to hear we're
Well,
on the
actually,
same
if
page
you
about this.
if you want, I could answer that one, and then I'll give you my second one after that.
All right. I mean, I think we could both talk
Yeah,
a little bit
absolutely.
about this because, first of all, this is a great question because Patrick Mahomes going for the three-peat and to get embarrassed like that, and really have no shot from the beginning, that looks down upon you. But I think partially, you can talk about his lack of help at the offensive line, his lack of help at wide receiver, and really any pass catcher, his lack of help in the running game. He really had nothing else around him going for him. But that is no excuse for a guy who we are putting in the top two of the GOAT conversation right here. I hear some people online talking all this about, well, if he had no one else to help him, then, whatever, we really can't, we can't factor it in this much. What? Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen. I mean, great and all. A great wing shooter and, obviously probably also in the top two of all time. He didn't have that much help, right?
Mhm.
But he was still great. I mean, obviously, Scottie Pippen, one of the best to ever play. I think he's an NBA 75, but correct me if I'm wrong. But really, what it comes down to is Patrick Mahomes is on a good football team. You can't go for a three-peat while being on a bad team. This was one of the better defenses, and while they didn't show it in this game against Philadelphia all year, Patrick Mahomes was on a great team. This, of course, is going to negatively impact his legacy. You cannot get blown out this bad in the Super Bowl with this high of stakes going for the first ever three-peat in Super Bowl era history. I guess the Packers did it. I think they mentioned this on the broadcast pre-Super Bowl era when it was just the NFL championship. But Patrick Mahomes, while he doesn't slide down on the all-time leaderboard, the distance between him and Brady just furthered significantly in my eyes. I think he's got more ground to make up, a lot more ground to make up now, and he's going to have to win at least two more to make up for this loss.
Yeah, for me, if he ever wants to pass Brady, he has to pass Brady's 7 Super Bowls, or at least
Mm,
tie his 7 Super Bowls. I don't think you can
okay.
look at a guy who's won 7 Super Bowls and say, "Okay, look at me here. I have 5 Super Bowls. Can you call me better?" No, you can't. Um, but I think you also have to understand that the Kansas City Chiefs have made 4 Super Bowls in the past 5 years. Um, this doesn't you can't call Allen or Lamar or Joe Burrow better than Mahomes in any sense if they didn't even get to this game. So there's some level of credit you have to give Mahomes to getting to this game, the Super Bowl, 4 out of the last 5 years. Um, Tom Brady lost 3 Super Bowls during his career. It happens to the best of us. I mean, it happens to him obviously too. So you have to count that in as well. But I completely agree. Um, a loss I don't care about. If they lose by 1 possession, whatever, that doesn't matter. To get blown out and have the worst first half in Super Bowl history is another discussion, obviously. Just a really bad showing from him. And as you mentioned, this doesn't put him down the leaderboard. He's still number 2, but it really does solidify a good distance, a good gap between him and Brady, where you realize we can end the discussions, at least for right now, that Mahomes might be better than Brady. If you want to talk about talent, maybe, but all-time accolades legacy, not even close. And it's the same thing I would say for LeBron Jordan. It's still not close in my opinion. I don't know where you stand on that, and we don't have to get into that right now. But Jordan easily greatest player of all time, and I think that's the same thing with Brady and Mahomes. And this game really helped us realize that in the long run.
I'd agree with your MJ Jordan take. I mean,
Mhm.
six rings, one MVP all every single time. No better player in the playoffs ever. But as for the football side of things, two things
Yeah.
I want to take away and build off of what you said. Number one, and I'm sure you can go and allude to this a lot, but the fact that he would have to tie or overtake in the Super Bowl department is a little bit surprising because there were some people getting ready. Yeah, if Mahomes took home this three-peat, get ready to call him tied with or ahead of Tom Brady. And obviously, it's a different circumstance after getting blown out. But first of all, I am surprised that uh, it's all about the rings for you, even if the other
Yeah.
stat departments are, even if the other stat departments are better, even if he has a
What
better
stat
passer.
departments, though? There aren't any stat departments either that are better. We're talking
No,
about the
I'm just
leaders?
saying by
Yeah.
the time his career ends.
Yeah, I
I mean,
still don't think there will be.
yeah,
'Cause
I know, I
we
agree.
we see Mahomes and we're saying, "This is a bad season for Mahomes. He's had an off year," right? And we've been saying that for the past 2, 3 years. How do you think that's gonna look in the stat sheets when he retires? Obviously, it won't make a big difference, but it's gonna add up over time. He can't keep having these lackluster years and still have the greatest stat line, the greatest individual stats in NFL history. We saw the Chiefs keep getting away with these close games this year, and we thought it was going to continue. And they went 0-11 in one possession games during the regular season. This finally felt like the time when it caught up to them, and we realized how fraudulent this team is. It was just the worst possible time for this to obviously happen. But no, I mean, I don't think that Mahomes by the end of things, will even really be in the same conversation as
Oh,
Brady.
not in the same conversation.
Well, I think it's going to be more clear by then than
Yeah,
it
when
is
it's all
now.
said and done.
Because
Right.
right now,
Because,
we could only imagine what Mahomes will do by the
right.
end of his career, but by then we're gonna look at the overall stats and the accolades, and we're going to be able to say, "Okay, Mahomes is retired, Brady's long retired. It's not that close,"
Yeah,
when I
also,
really look at it.
I'm not sure Mahomes is the type of guy to play well into his 40s, as of
Mhm.
course
Yeah,
Brady did
yeah.
for all that time. And playing in 10 Super Bowls brings me to my second point of just thinking about it now this way, how hard it must have been, or how hard it is in any sport, but more specifically football, to sustain a dynasty like Tom Brady and the Patriots did. Because there was a 20-year span where Tom Brady was in the running to win the Super Bowl every single year. And he went to 10 Super Bowls in that 20-year span, which I mean is ridiculous when we're thinking about it now as Mahomes gets blown out in this Super Bowl. And also the fact that Brady lost two Super Bowls to Eli Manning, who there's a chance doesn't get into the Hall of Fame. That's another discussion for another day.
I think if you you wanna have that little discussion right now, actually?
Sure, I mean, I think I
Mhm.
can.
Yeah, I was looking at it, like, yesterday or 2 days ago. Um, the only case you have for Eli Manning making the Hall of Fame is the fact that he won those 2 Super Bowls and he defeated Tom Brady. If you look at his actual statistics
It was terrible.
over his career, he's no better than Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, correct.
He's 11th in passing yards, he's 11th in passing touchdowns, all due to longevity. Kirk Cousins is 18th in passing yards. Does that mean Kirk Cousins is the 18th greatest quarterback in NFL history? You answer that question. I
Yeah,
think that I think that, the Super Bowls
mediocre
are the
at
only
best.
yeah, the Super Bowls are the only thing you can really use in Eli's favor, and it all comes down to who you're talking to and how much they value getting a ring, because if they don't value it as much as some other people will, they're gonna say he's not a Hall of Famer. But if that's all you really care about, if you're someone who doesn't think that Charles Barkley should be in the Hall of Fame, then you're also gonna be the same person that thinks Eli Manning shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame.
Matt, I think what's crazy to me is that
Mhm.
he's like maybe an all right quarterback outside of his two legacy seasons. Like,
He's
I
the
mean,
most
the
average quarterback
touchdown,
in the NFL.
yeah, the touchdown to interception ratio, not good. Nothing is good outside of the fact that he beat what we're continuously calling the freestanding GOAT twice in two Super Bowls as big time underdogs both times. And you know what? I think that matters a lot, but it's not going to be enough to get you into the Hall of Fame. He had two good seasons and two magical runs, I'll give it to him, with good defenses around him. But you want to know what? You can't be a bad quarterback with a couple of good games. That's like if you went out here and said that Jameis Winston was a top 5 quarterback this year because he balled out a couple times on prime time, right? That doesn't mean he was a top 5 quarterback this season. Sure, he had some dramatic games with some even more dramatic interviews after the fact, and some great
By
performances
the
thrown for
way,
what?
I
400
mhm.
400 yards on prime time, but that does not mean he's anywhere near who are really the top 10 quarterbacks. So no, I don't think Eli Manning will make the Hall of Fame.
By the way, I love Jameis Winston's, Super Bowl coverage as a reporter. You know, you have to catch the W. Um, he was just funny out there. And if you look at overall statistics, Eli Manning led the NFL in interceptions 3 seasons of his career. He had over a 63% completion percentage, 1 out of his 16 years.
Wow.
1 out of 16 years, over 63 completion percentage. Joe Burrow on the regular has a 70%. I mean, there was 1 year the years where Eli Manning had the most interceptions in the league, in 2007, 23 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. 2010, 31 touchdowns, 25 interceptions, and by far the worst of all, 2013, 18 touchdowns to 27 interceptions. 9 more interceptions than touchdowns.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into a Dorian Thompson-Robinson range, who had 6 interceptions to 0 touchdowns this season. That's how
Yeah.
ridiculous it is. He doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Guys, if you're in the chat, hit up our comment section. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to call in any Super Bowl thoughts, Eli Manning Hall of Fame talks, anything football related, thoughts on the dynamic kickoff rule after a year. Matt, do you still have another weekly wrap question to go for us?
Yeah, I mean, this one's pretty easy, definitely not as complex as the last one where you could kinda talk about it as much as you want. Um, it's a yes or no question that you can go a little more in detail to. Is this Travis Kelce's last ever NFL game?
Whoa, no. I
Mm,
mean, I mean, I the way I see it, cause he had that little emo haircut. I don't know. He's like one of the best tight ends to ever play football. I mean,
no,
I
but
think he's gonna.
what does that mean?
What does that mean? He's one of the
Jason
best.
Witten was one of the best tight ends. Tony Gonzalez was one of the best tight ends, but they still retired. What does it mean to be one of the best tight ends to play football? Doesn't mean you can't retire.
Yeah, but I think he enjoys playing football, and
Mhm.
he's on one of the best teams consistently. So, I mean, I personally, unless if the relationship with Mrs. Swift is, or sorry, Miss Swift is serious and he wants to start a family, then maybe that's a good idea to step away from football. But just because he's too many brutal hits, I don't think so. He's a tough guy. He handles the hits well. I think he'll keep playing. You think he'll retire?
I think it's a conversation to have, but I don't think he will. Um, yeah, I mean, you could look at it. Is Aaron Rodgers retiring?
Yes.
Maybe.
Come on, yes.
You think he will?
No one.
Probably,
I
but
mean, even if he doesn't want to, I don't think anyone
yeah.
takes him.
But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of guys where it feels like they're on the brink of retiring. They could retire. They might retire. They're starting to struggle. Age is getting up. But at the end of the day, they're going to keep going. They have at least one season. And I don't think Kelsey's a guy who won't leave when he's not satisfied, and I know damn well he's not satisfied after losing by 18 points in the Super Bowl. He might retire when he wins his next Super Bowl. He might be playing 3 seasons for that to happen, but he's not retiring. You can retire when you don't win a Super Bowl, but he's not retiring on this poor of a note. That's not something Travis Kelce would ever do.
Yeah, well, his brother Jason.
Yes, but his brother Jason is different than Travis.
If he played one more season, he would have ended it on a high note.
Yeah. I mean,
But
mhm,
I don't know.
that is something to look at, but I don't think that Kelsey is he's not gonna retire. He has at least one more year in the tank. Um, he has as many years in the tank as he wants to have. If it was up to his health and his body, doesn't need to retire anytime soon. If it's up to him wanting to enjoy his somewhat younger years of his life and maybe go into his podcast more, maybe if he marries Taylor Swift, that's when you have your best conversation, but it's nothing related to football if he retires, in my opinion.
Absolutely, he's been a tough guy his whole career. He bounces off a lot of tackles, lowers the
It
shoulder. I mean, have you ever I mean, I'm trying to remember back. I don't think I've ever seen Kelsey grimace or needed to be helped off the field,
Yeah, I mean,
and I think he's
even if
just
he had, he's always handled it really
yeah,
well.
and he's always bounced back. I
Mhm,
mean, I think he's the type of guy to play till you can't because I think that's just the mentality, right? It could be, New Heights podcast want to do that a little more and,
mhm.
maybe preserve the body for later because football is a rough sport. But I think as long as he has the passion for the game, he'll keep playing it.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. We've been going for some time now, 41 minutes. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap things up?
No, thanks for a great season, Matt. Appreciate you having me on. It's certainly been a ride. Who would have
Yep.
expected after a 2-2 start and Nick Sirianni shaving his head bald and screaming at fans for the Eagles to drop 40 in the Super Bowl and uh, finish the season, with one loss in 18 games. So, and great turnaround for the Eagles. I think there's some missing street lights on Broad Street where they're gonna where all the Eagles fans are partying right now and probably still I mean, who knows? Philadelphia
I don't know,
sports
yeah.
fans at this point, they're crazy. But in a good way, they're some of the most passionate fans in all of sports. So congratulations to the Eagles fans, Chiefs fans. Uh, sorry that you guys couldn't come away with this one, but you've had more than enough success uh, for your fair share of Super Bowl love. So thanks for having me on, Matt. It's been a great season, and the Eagles soar into Super Bowl history.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't thank you enough for coming on. Really do appreciate it. For everyone who made it up to this point, thank you for watching. Again, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Josh Wilver for your Highlight Haven NFL recap show. And as always, we will see you next time.